This reading, as usual, is from Rays of the One Light, Weekly Commentaries on the Bible and the Bhagavad Gita by Swami Kriyananda. This week's reading, Why Do Devotees Fall? Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. The following commentary is based on the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda. An endlessly fascinating question is, why did Judas fall after receiving the extraordinary blessing of being accepted into the inner circle of Jesus Christ's disciples? For Judas was one of the 12 apostles. Yet he betrayed Jesus and earned for himself the opprobrium of Christendom for all futurity, for his sin. We find Judas reprimanding Jesus just days before that betrayal. Jesus, aware that his disciples would soon be facing with his death the supreme tragedy of their lives, allowed Mary to express her devotion by anointing his feet with costly ointment. This act of wanton waste, as Judas saw it, awakened indignation in that disciple. Why was not this ointment sold for 300 pence and given to the poor? This he said, not because he cared for the poor, but because he was a thief and kept the purse and bare what was put therein. And then said Jesus, let her alone. Against the day of my burying hath she kept this. For the poor always ye have with you, but me ye have not always. Doubt not the power of delusion. Respect it. Indeed, fear it, though not in the sense of cowering before it. For as Yogananda said, one is not safe until he attains nirvikalpa samadhi, the state of final union with God. Judas, through attachment to money, opened his consciousness to subtle influences, which may be called satanic, that drew his thoughts toward other related attitudes, the importance of worldly power, for instance, and of worldly influence. The Bhagavad Gita gives a graphic explanation of how easily the mind can be drawn downward once it begins to feed on wrong attitudes. In the second chapter, Sri Krishna states, if one ponders on sense objects, there springs up attraction to them. From attraction grows desire. Desire, impatient for fulfillment, flames to anger. From anger there rises infatuation, or the delusion that one object alone is worth clinging to the exclusion of all others. From this infatuation ensues forgetfulness of the higher self. From the forgetfulness of the self follows degeneration of the discriminative faculty. And when discrimination is lost, there follows the annihilation of one's spiritual life. At the first thought of delusion, Paramahansa Yogananda said, that is the time to stop it. And thus, through Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind. Oh, oh, oh.
As Bharati was reading that stanza from the Bhagavad Gita, I was thinking of pie. I had a pie shop on the east side. And I was following it along. No, we don't have to go that far with it. Thank you, Bharati. So Swami Kriyananda, he writes all the topics that we explore each week on our Sunday service, including the affirmations and the readings. And the thing that you may know about Swami, or you might not know, is that his use of words is very deliberate and specific. And so I was thinking about that with this topic, why do devotees fall? He doesn't say, why do people fall? He says, why do devotees fall? And I was thinking about the word fall. Does that mean like a huge fall, like a big mistake like Judas? Or is that also include those less than optimal decisions that we make in our everyday life? So these are some of the questions that have kind of been bouncing around in my mind and my heart as I was contemplating sharing today. Devotees are those that are very dedicated and committed to something. And in this case, those that are committed to spiritual truths, to God, and to feeling with the goal of feeling God's presence ever more completely in their lives. It's a God focus. And so falling then is losing that God focus. It is losing that dedication, and it is walking on the path away from self-realization. In this well-known story of Judas, Judas's focus shifts to the money purse rather than being in the presence of his Christ. And he justifies this by putting it into the context of Jesus' teachings, giving money to the poor. But his motives are maybe grief-driven, but greed-driven and not altruistic. I believe he's suffering in that moment. He's caught in his desires for what do I get? And also his egoic pride in that he knows how to handle the money. But he lost his connection to his guru, to his teacher. And in his attachment to his ego, his ideas, his self-righteousness, he chose to betray Jesus, which led to the crucifixion. Paramahansa Yogananda told Swami Kriyananda that Judas was a prophet, and Swamiji was a little bit in disbelief of this. But Paramahansa Yogananda said that Judas had to be a prophet to be one of the 12 disciples, and he suffered for 2,000 years because of his treachery, but he eventually was liberated. Yogananda said in this century, now we can say in last century. When we turn our backs on spirit, we suffer. But this suffering, these falls, these detours in our life, they're never permanent. We all have the same destiny. We're all going back to God. There's really no exceptions in that. It's just a matter of how long it takes to get there. What is comforting to me is that Divine Mother is always there with her arms open wide, just waiting for us with infinite compassion and infinite love. I've grown to really appreciate the story of the prodigal son, which many of us know from the book of Luke in the Bible. A man has 2 sons, and one of his sons does not follow his instruction and goes and spends his inheritance lavishly and behaves in a way that causes him shame and regret. And he comes back to his father just in a state of feeling destitute and just thinking he's going to get punished and wanting to, at the very least, maybe be a servant in the house of his father. But instead of punishment, he is greeted with open arms and just pure joy from his father. You're home, you've returned. I'm so excited. And instead of punishment, he dresses him in fine clothes and prepares an incredible feast for him to celebrate his son's return. So there's this divine force that is always bringing us back to our source and love. And there is also always a force that's pulling us away from that source, that love, into Maya or into delusion. And all of us, that are here today, obviously, we're looking for that connection, that source, that presence of God. So what makes us say, I'm going to go this way instead? And our reading today, our teachings, the scriptures all say the same thing. It's our desires. And it's our desires that are not rooted in our soul's desire, in God's will for us, our divine nature. And these missteps delay us on the spiritual path. And when we add energy to these desires and to their fulfillment, then we create attachment, and then we create delusion. Swami Kriyananda writes, all delusions endanger one's peace of mind, strengthen the ego, and deepen one's sense of isolation from others and from any sense of support from the universe. Worst of all, they cause us to seek fulfillment in means that always prove to be, in the end, mere shadows. A couple of years ago, when the pandemic was waning, I had finished a graduate degree and my youngest child went off to college. And I had it in my mind that I was going to move to the Oregon coast. I'm a deep lover of the ocean, and every time I go to the coast, I get this overwhelming desire to move there. And this has been going on for a lot of years. And I thought, well, now's the time. And it really wasn't a harmful desire, but I was so clear in my rightness, I moved out of my apartment in the community. I packed up all my belongings and put them in storage, and I started looking for a job and a place to live. And my rationale to myself was, well, I feel Divine Mother's presence in the ocean. I could really use a really long, deep seclusion for my spiritual life. And I live so close, it will be so close to Portland. I can always go to Sunday service and to events and things like that. And my desire wasn't clearly away from my spiritual path, but it wasn't in attunement with God's will for me. And I was really justifying, spiritualizing my desires to justify my actions. Well, I'm still in Portland. A lot of my belongings are still in storage, and there's more to the story. But the point is that the forces that pull us out of attunement with God's will are really subtle, and they're always there. And like our reading said, Yogananda says we're never really free from delusion until we reach Nirvikalpa Samadhi, which is that higher state of meditation, self-realization, absorption. So, I was thinking about, okay, so we're this soul in a physical form wanting to know our oneness with God, wanting to experience ever more joy and peace and bliss. And there's also an outward pulling force. I just remembered I didn't even introduce ourselves. I'll do that at the end. And there's always an outward pulling force that's wanting us to forego the spiritual path. It's wanting us to really enjoy the pleasures of the body and the world, and it offers us a lot of invitations to boost our ego. And I started thinking, I was like, this out and this in, it's like a Netflix series. Each week in the Festival of Light, when the minister does the arati, we sing Father, Mother. And last week I was singing it and thinking, all desires born of delusion. And I thought, Swami uses these words so accurately. All desires born out of delusion. He's not saying don't have any desires, but he's saying to use our discernment to go inward and notice if our desires are rooted in our ego and in world consciousness, or are they in tune with God's will for us? And if they are or if they aren't, we just offer them at the feet of Divine Mother. In the movie Awake, there's an exchange that I really appreciate. It's between Herb Jeffries, who's a Hollywood actor and jazz singer in the 20s, and Yogananda. And in the film, it's called Awake. If you haven't seen it, watch it tonight. It's fantastic. I can't tell you how many times that I've watched it, but I watched it again this week to remember this exchange. And he recalls coming to Mount Washington, where Yogananda was, and he says to Yogananda, my whole life, all the religions I've been a part of have told me, thou shalt not. And I want to know, what can I do on this path? And Yogananda says to him, well, do you smoke? And Herb Jeffrey says, yes. And Yogananda says, you may continue. And Yogananda says, well, do you drink? And the actor says, yes. And Yogananda says, you may continue. And then Yogananda asks him, do you spend time with the opposite sex promiscuously? And Herb Jeffrey says, yes. Yogananda says, you may continue. And then Yogananda added, you may continue with all these activities, but I must warn you, if you take up on this path, those desires will fall away. In the extended writings of this reading from Swamiji, he writes, and this is kind of long, but I'm going to read it to you. What he writes about, and which I loved, was that stanza that we read from the Gita in the reading talks about the descending path that desires to attachment to delusion to a fall can take us. But Swami Kriyananda says it can be looked at a different way and look at the ascending road. So this is what he describes as the ascending road. For when a person concentrates on spiritual ideals, he feels himself increasingly attracted toward them. From this attraction grows the desire to live by them. The desire to live spiritually develops into an intense yearning for God. Such divine yearning flames to impatience with anything that might prevent one from realizing him. From this impatience with lesser realities arises total absorption in the consciousness of God. And from such absorption ensues forgetfulness of the senses. And from sense forgetfulness arises indifference to worldly modes of thinking and behaving. Estrangement from worldly consciousness results in the complete annihilation of delusion. I'm going to say that line again because I'm memorizing it. I think it's fantastic. Estrangement from worldly consciousness results in the annihilation of delusion. Thinking back to that song that we sing during the Arati, may our thoughts be only of thee, train our hearts to sing thy name. I love this line because it's such an affirmation of our soul's desire and also a sincere request for help in the process. Paramahansa Yogananda gives us a formula, he calls it, it's well known, for spiritual success. He says it's 25% our efforts, 25% the Guru's efforts on our behalf, and 50% the grace of God. And he added, of that 25% on our behalf, of our effort, it needs to be 100% of our will and our sincerity. So, I'm always bringing spiritual teachings to the practical. And so I was thinking about how can we support our efforts on the spiritual path. We all need support to maintain our dedication and our focus. And 3 things, and you probably all know this, but I'm going to share it again. The first one is practice meditation. Start where you are, be consistent, and stretch yourself every once in a while. The last couple of years, I've made it the practice during when we have our Kriya initiations twice a year, that I choose one thing to stretch myself in my meditation practice, and it's been an excellent motivator. I found that now even other times of the year when there's kind of a momentous event, maybe it's Guru night or it's some other occasion, I'll make that a motivator in what can I do to stretch my meditation practice. 2, hang out with truth seekers. We call that satsang at Ananda. Ananda Portland specifically has so many offerings to share time with one another. So there's our worship time, but there's also meals, there's events, there's classes, there's outings, there's all kinds of opportunities. So come. And lastly, read and watch uplifting material. This is a great opportunity for introspection, to find out what is your criteria for your mental diet. I realized recently the connection with me and the news. I grew up in a family of origin that my dad worked for the Washington Post. So reading the paper every day was a big deal. We had papers were a central part of our life, but now I'm noticing the effects on my well-being from reading the news. And so I've had to really go inward and adjust to what is my tolerance, what's my criteria for this bringing in this material. Swamiji says we're never safe from delusion until we're firmly established in God consciousness. No matter how many times we fall, God will wait for us until we return to him. It is he alone who can save us through ever-deepening inner communion with him. Never fear, therefore, to give God as much of yourself as possible. He will do the rest. So we do our best under the circumstances of our life. I encourage you to continue your relationship with God through your inner life, and the divine will do the rest. Miracles happen, change happen, our lives change, and detours happen, but we all come home back to our oneness in spirit through the grace of God. So before I end with Whispers from Eternity, those that know me, I'm Rose, and this is Nayaswami Lorda, and we're joined by Badri and Surendra, and I apologize for that. Sometimes I just get focused. So I'm going to finish today's talk from Whispers from Eternity. This is number 55. I want to build a rainbow bridge of self-realization. The gulf of ages lay between thee and me, widening as the waters of my oblivion of thee grew through centuries. I stand on this rocky shore of matter, gazing out over the gulf, hoping to see beyond thy smooth shores of peace. My inner thought architects will build for me a bridge of constant remembrance of thee. The strong mental girders of self-control now are being riveted together. My dreams of thee gather to make a rainbow bridge of self-realization over which very soon I will reach thy shore. Thank you. And I believe we're going to have some more music.
I'm actually going to say the title of this song because the last word in the title doesn't appear anywhere in the song itself. So it is, of course, Love is a Magician. Love is all I know, sun rays on the snow of a winter long, in darkness without song. Oh, my heart's a fire, burning all desire. Only you remain, and life again. Too long I did stray, flung lifetimes away, imagined you did not care. I know now your smile was mine all the while. I listened and love was there. I can't breathe